Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Writers Infusion. I'm your host, Susan. I am here with Julie, Ed, Jen, and Dave, and we are here to critique a submission of historical fiction from Massachusetts. And I'll read the summary, or I'll do my best to read the summary, and then Ed's reading today, right?
Yes.
Set during England's 14th century invasion of France, Welsh minstrel accompanies his patron Edward the Black Prince into France. He becomes embroiled in conspiracies while employing the services of the enigmatic mercenary Radu the Black of Transylvania, who hunts a mysterious adversary known only as the Natchwearer. Okay, I'll pass it over.
Thomas de Beauchamp, the Earl of Warwick, struggled to have his words heard over the rising tumult. Rein in, damn you. Fall back and regroup at the line. Are you so simple and starved of senses? The Irish and Welsh surged forward, heedless of their commander's words. Behind him, Sir Richard Talbot laughed out loud. Look at them, Warwick, just look at them, the Irish. Earl Warwick did look and realized the matter was beyond him now. They want of meat, wine, and chattels. They see poorly defended houses and abandoned stalls. The abbey doors will be boarded up, and the nobles will be well protected. But the common folks are lambs fit for slaughter, may God have mercy upon them. Warwick watched as some Irish gallows, easily recognizable by their colorful Gaelic garb, worn over several acatins, crashed through a hastily erected barricade of carts. Wooden logs and crates salvaged from the Odin River docks by desperate townsfolk were split apart by the Irish assault, as though they were haystacks. They had been a laughably poor defense. The gallowglass hacked and chopped through them, unmindful of the damage this did to their own blades. No knight would have so dulled his sword, Warwick thought scornfully. The sun was beating down mercilessly, but the breeze borne off the Odin River was the hot breath of hell itself. The stink of blood and death hit the two English knights like a hammer each time the wind rose. Scouts came and went, delivering Warwick's orders and relaying them, ineffectually, to the disorganized horde below. The preparation of an entire night had been tossed aside in a matter of minutes, and now chaos reigned in Cannes. By St. George's spurs, my lord, have you ever seen the like? God, was my sword not glutted with enough of this Irish blood when they sprang upon us when we were at Dornoch? Talbot, his expensive half-plate armor clanking with each movement, reined his horse close to Warwick's own steed, and looked down to the battling men, mostly Welsh and Irish regulars. His disgust for what he deemed the lesser peoples was well known to Warwick. Warwick grunted. His own preeminent distaste for the Irish was born of memories of their hit-and-run tactics during the Scottish campaigns, the Battle of Dornoch among them. By God, that had been a nightmare. Now, a few of the northern clans, O'Neill and McMahon amongst them, had sworn to fight for King Edward, as long as it suited them. They had all the obedience of rabid dogs, and they are not the worst of the law. Here comes Northampton, Talbot smirked, pointing at a horse approaching up the hill at a canter, undoubtedly to suggest the gallows idea again, after seeing this rubbish. Quick, look suitably put out. Warwick sighed privately, and kept his face impassive, not wanting Talbot to see how much he really was put out. The Earl of Northampton was dressed in his full suit of half-plate and mail armor, its filigree of gold and silver worked in stylized etchings, catching the light of the sun. Several hundred florins undoubtedly squandered on designs that a well-placed mace or sword blade could easily ruin. But that was just another way Northampton flaunted the wealth he enjoyed from sizable rents collected across the Midlands of England. The standard of his house was borne aloft by a young page wearing only Northampton regalia over a simple smock. The gangly youth riding behind his lord had the look of a lad well out of his element. I wonder how many pages Northampton will go through on this campaign. The Scots murdered 8 of them, as I recall. The fool should at least give them a helmet and some chain mesh. He can bloody afford it. He winced. I've been around Talbot too long. Christ, forgive my vulgarity. A gallows, my lords, Northampton shouted up at them, to be heard above the tumult. Hang 6 or 7 of them, dead center of camp, and by God you'll have order then. Aye, that's how we do it on my Irish lands. Talbot looked over his shoulder at Warwick and rolled his eyes. Warwick ignored him and responded kindly. Aye, William, but surely not dead center. The flies, man. Ha! Flies won't be a bother with this lot. Their hides already have maggots crawling around inside of them, lice-bitten curs. Good day to you, Sir Talbot. Northampton nodded in greeting to the favored knight. My Lord Earl, Talbot said, bowing slightly in his saddle. The Count seems to have left his door open and thrown the French masses to the wolves of summer. His Majesty will get his wish, and there shall be no siege, methinks. That French peacock Comte de Tours is probably holed up with the rest of them on the island, undoubtedly with the rest of the noble fleur-de-lis, Talbot added with a sneer. Talbot shared his king's distaste for French enthusiastically. Agreed, Warwick had already discerned that what was happening from reports he had already received from his forward scouting parties. The Count, or Comte de Tours, and the rest of the king's nobility had seen to their own protection well enough. Trusting to its newer, stronger walls, the inner city, built upon the bank of the River Orne, was highly defensible, as compared to the outer, older city with its crumbling walls and much larger areas to cover. Warwick supposed he might have done the same thing in Count Tours' position, but not without a fight. He had been expecting archers on the walls, pikemen lined up behind rough stockades, and captains giving orders to repel and hold. To find a pitiable defense of a few determined peasants, desperate to protect their homes and businesses, with nary a high-born gentleman to lead them, was unthinkable. Those peasants now floated belly up or face down in the river below. They had died screaming for Christ's mercy. Spurred onward by easy loot and mayhem, England's armies were becoming uncontrollable. I am in danger of agreeing with Northampton for once. These Irish and Welsh need reining in. Speaking of which, I say, William. Warwick turned his horse towards Northampton, who was looking with distaste into the corpse-choked river below. That Welsh minstrel who accompanies the prince, was he not with you earlier? He mentioned something about composing a song about the battle. Ah, that Willem fellow, aye. He was with me this morning. I was recounting my family history so that he might be persuaded to compose a song about my lineage. I thought it seemly at first that the prince should keep a Welsh-born minstrel in his retinue, but at least he's of noble stock himself, at least as far as that goes in Wales, eh, Thomas? Ha, I could not say where he has gotten to. Indeed, no matter. Warwick spurred his horse about and trotted back down the hill, with Talbot and Northampton keeping slightly behind. Warwick debated whether he should enter the city or not. He would have to send terms of surrender across the Orne to the new city as soon as the abbey fell. Perhaps in that instance a little mayhem could be of benefit. A good leader had to know how to turn an incident into an advantage, and Warwick had risen far by knowing how to examine a problem from all sides and implement satisfactory solutions. The king would see things his way. Wait, who the devil is that? Talbot suddenly exclaimed. Northampton and Warwick turned to regard where Talbot was pointing. A large group of men could be seen running pell-mell into the city via a large gap in the stone wall that sappers had successfully breached hours before. Warwick was certain he had placed men there to guard it, but only against people from escaping, not entering. He squinted and recognized the standard the riders were flying, and he scowled. The worst of the lot, damnation. Talbot, get your men in order. I am entering the city. William, there may be something to a gallows after all. Talbot was still squinting against the sun's glare, trying to make out the standard. It was a yellow background with a black bird of some sort, clasping a red-colored sword. I don't recognize that house. Mercenaries, Warwick swore aloud in response as he spurred his horse to a gallop.
And you'll hear, you can read the swearing if you actually download
I skipped a
your
lot.
copy.
I like your style.
But good job.
Nice, sir.
I thought the voice was good in the story, but I was confused. I have a general idea that there's a battle going on, and there are a few guys there, and I had to read it a few times, and I'm really sorry, but I'm still confused.
Yeah. My
So,
first comment
how was
was,
it
I don't know
involved?
who's fighting who, where, or why.
Pretty much.
And what alliances are John? I was
Right,
Yeah.
so, I mean, as a one simple example, we get to the second page, and then we realize that they're looking down on the men. I don't even remember where that is, if someone can find it, but it takes a while to even realize that you have these men talking. So when a battle,
Oh, no. I don't know if he's physically looking down. I think he was showing disdain looking down at the men, because the next sentence, he talks about the lesser peoples.
Oh,
didn't
but I
think it
still
was
thought it was-
physical. It may be.
No, I think,
I don't know.
I think he's physically looking.
Okay,
He's on a
sorry.
hill
So
or
I
something.
would say at
Yeah.
first, when I picture a battle, I would picture the leaders right at the front of it. And that's not always true, but that's just how I happened to picture it when it started. And then I found out a little bit into the story that that wasn't the case. So, except for a general picture of the men hoarding and knocking things over, I really didn't have a scene at all in my head. And I think that in lots of cases when you're starting a book, and there are a couple of people, you don't necessarily have to describe the scene around you. We just read another story where there's a classroom. That's all you need to know, it's a classroom. I've got the whole thing in my head. But when it's a battle, I need it kind of laid out for me. Otherwise, I have no idea of what's going on. So that's my first comment, and then I'll pass it on.
I think this has potential to tell a really rich historical tale. But I wonder who's telling it. I thought it was objective, and then it seems there's a narrator who's, I don't know, he's telling a personal tale. Page
Right. There's some I in there.
4, I'm in
Yeah.
danger of agreeing with Northampton for once. These Irish and Welsh need reining in. Speaking of which, and speaking of reigning, I do want to point out homophones on page 2 especially. You have now chaos reigned in Cain, or Khan, I would put a G in there. But you use reign in the next paragraph. Talbot, his expensive half-plate armor clanking with each movement, reined his horse, I would say R-E-I-N, for pulling on the reins. And then farther down, here comes Northampton. Talbot smirked, second last paragraph on page 2, pointing at a horse approaching up the hill at a canter. At a canter is a man who sings in a temple, but at a canter with an E-R is the pace of a horse, a slower pace of a horse. So those are homophones, just be careful. But I will tell you, I just looked up canter, and it comes from Canterbury Tales. It's the pace at which the pilgrims rode to Canterbury.
Ooh.
I know that, I didn't know that. So
Wow.
thank you for educating me, educating me.
Well, you
as they
notice too
say.
that he's pointing at a horse approaching up the hill, so they are.
Oh, there's a hill.
It definitely shows they're on a hill.
Yes.
So they weren't really looking down.
They were looking down and looking down.
Yes. I was
Yeah, that's a
confused.
good point. I mean, when you're talking about all the eyes and these observations, they should probably be in italics.
Yeah.
I think they're supposed to be
they're internal
ascribed.
thoughts,
Yeah, I think they're supposed to be
Yes.
ascribed to Warwick. Now,
I'm not
so,
sure.
well, the interesting thing is, I mean, it's supposed to be, I mean, if you look at the description, the summary, it's supposed to be about somebody named, David of Gwilym or something like that. But this is not him at all. This is
Yes.
a bunch of other people. And so if it's really about this other guy, maybe you don't want to start with, the haughty nobles up on the hill.
Or at least refer to them. At least bring them in somehow, so that you
Yeah.
know that they'll be connected
Right.
somehow.
Well, they do mention him.
They do?
They're looking for,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're looking for the
Yeah, the minstrel.
minstrel. Right.
Yeah, the minstrel with you.
In the middle of the battle, they're talking about writing lyrics for them, and I'm,
Well,
what?
then it's more like a comedy.
Yeah, well, it's silly, it's out of place. What I got out of this was, first of all, I was muddle-headed for a while after reading it. I kind of walked into walls. I didn't know what I was reading about, or where it was, although it said 14th century invasion of France. But who's invading France? I don't know.
Yes.
What's happening here is the author has an immense amount of information and knowledge about this period in time, and the people involved, and the conflicts that are involved, and it gets caught in his throat. He's trying to jam everything in these 5 pages into the story. I don't know anything about this time period. You have to help me across the street. I need help to understand who's fighting, why they're fighting, what their tactics are. I don't need to know that they hate the Irish or the Welsh, or they had problems with this, or they're writing stories, or expecting somebody to write a song about this person's lineage. It's just a shotgun blast in the face of too much to understand too soon. So my suggestion is it's a reasonable thing to talk about a battle at the beginning of a story. No problem. That gets your interest. But stick to the battle. The stresses of the battle, the people going here and the people not following on, that's all fine. Okay, now you've established, but don't talk about other things in the histories and the fine designs on their armor. I mean, that has nothing to do with the opening scene.
I wrote the same thing. There's too much thinking. I mean, they're fighting right now, and they won't be going into details on all these little thoughts. They're
Yeah,
going to want to win
just
the battle.
get to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just
Right.
get.
And can you explain the whole thing about the Irish, because it sounds like the Irish are fighting for them,
Yes.
and then about 3 pages in,
He hates the Irish.
they say, right, they can't stand the Irish, and it
Let's-
sounds like and then I'm not sure if
And
they're
then we
on
have
the same side.
mercenaries, where are the
Yeah.
mercenaries?
Yeah, so I had to read it 3 times before I could piece it together, but I think after 3 times I understand the sequence of events. But, you know, a reader isn't going to read it 3 times and stick with their book. They're gonna get confused, they're gonna close the book, and that's the last time they're gonna open it. So you definitely need to clarify, to Ed's point, where are they? When are they? Who are they? But it appears to me that the British were battling the Irish and the Welsh and beat them, but then the Irish and the Welsh, probably betraying their own people, said, okay, we'll come fight for the British, but the British will always
Against the French.
down
It's a French.
against the
Against the
French, against the French.
But then I need a map, because I'm already confused.
Yes.
And I need puppets to.
That's
show
right,
it.
that's right.
But I did have to read it a few times. I think the writing voice is awesome. I just think you just need to really clarify who's who. So, you know, like you mentioned Thomas, you know, de Beauchamp in the beginning, and then you don't refer to him, you refer to him as Warwick the whole way. And then like 4 pages in, someone calls him Thomas, and I'm
That's
like,
very confusing.
who's Thomas? Like I totally
Yes.
forgot that he's Thomas because he's Warwick. So just, you know, people having 3 different names is very confusing.
Especially.
Especially at the beginning, right? And the same thing, like Northampton, and then suddenly he was called William. You know, I had to go
Yes.
back, and I'm like, well, who's William? So try to just stick with it. And I do think that when the author is shifting into first person, it is internal thoughts. So again, you want to take internal thoughts, treat them like dialogue, put them on a new paragraph, indent them, and italicize them so that it's clear that it's internal dialogue. Because otherwise it feels like you're shifting between third person and first person, and it gets confusing.
And I want to emphasize something that Jen said about voice, and I had mentioned that too, that it is, you do have a good voice here, and that's really hard to do. So
Yeah,
I want to
it is
commend you
hard.
for that.
And I did not know what a standard was, and it took me a while. So the sentence on page 3, at the very top, the standard of his house was borne aloft by a young page wearing only
Oh, is it a
Northampton
flag?
regalia over a simple smock.
Yeah.
I was like,
It's
like a
what?
pennant.
It's a symbol.
It's a penance.
I had no
I think it
idea.
was a pen.
I had no idea. It wasn't until they used the word standard again in relationship to the mercenaries where I was like, oh, it's probably that flag that they kind of, you know, riding at the battle with, you know. But again, I had to read that 3 times, and I'm like, young page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
was
seems
all-
like simplification
Yeah.
and kind of taking your time.
Yes.
I mean, you don't have to
Slow
rush
down.
through this. Yeah,
Slow down.
exactly.
Have fun with it, look at it,
Set the scene.
yeah.
Show us. Describe it to us. You know,
Especially in a
lead us
battle
through
scene.
it.
A battle scene, you really
Battle
want to
scenes
see.
Yeah, because it's not really a battle, it's really a massacre. I mean, they haven't gotten to the inner city yet where the soldiers probably are. They're just killing these poor peasants. So it's not even a battle, it's a massacre. So, and they're up there talking about, you know,
And that's another
something
aspect
else,
of
and I'm like,
this.
the people getting slaughtered. And maybe that's okay because it really shows what horrible people they are, and that's
Yeah.
okay, I think.
Yeah.
But maybe show some of the massacre and show their indifference to it.
Yeah.
You know, you just say, yeah, they're belly up and face down, but like, you know,
That was a question I had. Are these supposed to be the good guys? Okay.
I was wondering that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Am I supposed to?
I don't
Am I
know.
supposed to care about
Are
them?
we rooting for these guys?
Yeah.
I don't
Are we
think so.
supposed to be rooting for
They're
these
not very
guys?
nice.
If they're
No.
and if they're not, why are we starting the story with them? You know, why
Well-
are we starting the
Good
story
question.
with people we're not supposed to like?
Well, think about the opening scenes from Star Wars.
Well,
I don't remember. You mean the newest
yeah, but it
one?
shifts
newest
back
one.
and
Oh, I
forth.
Yes,
haven't
it
seen
does,
it yet, so
but there
don't
are
say too
really
much.
bad guys and there are really good guys.
Right.
So you have to do both.
Sure.
You can't, because I don't know if these are good guys or not.
No, that's absolutely
Yeah.
true. I mean, even the original Star Wars, it starts off with
Big
Darth
battle
Vader,
scene.
Well, but you
big
got Leia
battle scene,
too.
and
It
it's
starts
like-
off with Leia too. Leia's-
Exactly, but it shifts back and forth.
Yeah.
Well, and plus at this point, when
And
you're
it's
doing.
absolutely clear who's good and who's bad.
Right, but
You
at this
know,
point
no
too, now
question.
everyone knows Star Wars, you can start with
Yeah.
whoever you want. Yeah.
Right.
What are gallow glass?
Oh, I don't know.
Irish gallow glass.
I just assumed that it was the not a clan of the Irish, but maybe what they call
right.
themselves.
I don't
Like,
know.
it wasn't their last
No idea.
names, because they
It's-
say it
it's-
was like, the O'Neills and the McMahons,
Right.
but,
Yeah,
But it seems important enough, because it's at the beginning, it says,
right.
Warwick watched as some Irish gallows glass, easily recognizable by their colorful Gaelic garb. Are they soldiers?
Yeah.
But I
No
don't
idea.
know. And that's what I mean. The author has an enormous understanding of not only the scene, but terms of the area and the time, the 14th century. So he's using these terms. I don't know what they mean.
Right.
I'm not from the 14th century.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm with you. I don't know how to
It
pronounce
started out in the
Aquitaine.
Oh,
And also, by the way, since we're talking about a battle,
Yes.
even in the very opening scene, rein in, damn you, fall back, and there's a lot of talking there. I'd say rein in, fall back, it's very short and quick.
Yes.
Maybe I'm being picky, but
Yeah.
there's not a whole, it's just like the whole thing, a lot of this is a lot of a thought process. And right now you're in a battle, you're in a massacre, it's
It's true, it's
quick.
usually short.
Right,
yeah, well, he
Sentences.
can't
Right.
control them. They're just like, they're going. Like,
he's taken too long to tell them that.
yeah, and, but they're not gonna listen to him anyway. Right?
Yeah, they're out of control, that's the
They are.
problem.
They're out of control.
Yes. But maybe if the minstrel sings a song.
Maybe that's it, they have to stop and, okay, hold it, everybody, we're writing song.
Yes.
It's
They
called
don't
the
understand what the
music.
battle's all about in the song.
All right, do we have anything else?
Now, just slow down, I think it has potential, but you're taking us too quickly. The signposts are flying by me and I can't read them.
That sums it up.
Here, here.
Right, yeah, take your time and,
The standard is flying
The
remember
standards,
that
that's
we
right.
remember again that we're coming into this without any knowledge of that time era, or at least you can make that assumption.
And
Yeah.
kudos to you for having all that knowledge.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
to imitate the war.
and maybe you're writing for an audience that likes this particular genre, but I could certainly enjoy the story even though it's not the typical genre that
Yes.
I would read. It doesn't mean that I still couldn't appreciate it and enjoy the story. So I don't think we're asking you to dumb it down really, but maybe clarify it and don't
Stretch it
assume
out.
Yeah,
that,
stretch it out.
that we're all historians and that we would understand all of the terminology.
Yes, and not too many names and flipping back and
Yeah.
forth. I need that as a chart at the beginning, which actually happens in a lot of books.
Yes.
Yes.
So that way I can refer to it,
Yeah.
and otherwise I can't remember.
It's
the
also
story.
glossaries in books too, but
Yeah.
if I see that, I throw the
Maps.
book on the floor.
Do you know?
I want to know what's going on as I'm reading it, I
Yeah,
don't have to
right,
work it.
Yes.
That's right. Okay.
But sometimes, like, there was one book called The House of the Scorpion, which won a ton of awards. And in the beginning, the author, Nancy Farmer, had to put a family tree.
Yep.
Right, she had to put the family tree,
Sure.
and the book is fantastic, but you did need the family tree, and the book is definitely worth reading, so, I think having some of those references in the beginning, like a lot of them start with maps, and I think that's okay.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much for submitting, and thank you everyone else for watching this episode. We look forward to, let me put that out. And we'll see you next time. Keep writing.
There's a really cute young adult series called The Hero's Guide to Saving the Kingdom. And there are minstrels, there are bards who follow these people along, but
They're
they sing.
explaining.
They sing of the botched exploits of the heroes. Wait a second, he's not putting us in good light. It is so
Monty
funny.
Python.
Yes, it's so funny.